Imagine a frail, 78-year-old cleric, dressed in simple black robes, sitting cross-legged on a worn rug in a modest French farmhouse just outside Paris. It's late 1978. The world watches as this exiled Ayatollah, Ruhollah Khomeini, issues fiery messages on smuggled cassette tapes that are flooding into Iran's mosques and bazaars. Millions listen in secret, their hearts pounding with defiance against a king who seemed untouchable. Within months, that king would flee, a 2,500-year-old monarchy would crumble, and this same Ayatollah would step off a plane in Tehran to the roar of millions, declaring a new Islamic Republic. How did a quiet scholar from a dusty provincial town orchestrate one of the most dramatic revolutions of the 20th century? Today, we dive deep into the astonishing ascent of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the man who went from seminary teacher to Iran's supreme leader. Born on 17th May 1900 or 24th September 1902, depending on the family account, in the small town of Khomeyn, about 160 kilometers southwest of Qom, Ruhollah Mostafa Musavi Khomeini entered a world steeped in Shia religious tradition. His father, Ayatollah Sayyid Mustafa Musavi, a respected cleric, was murdered by a local landlord when Ruhollah was just 5 months old, according to most records, or 2 years old by others. Left fatherless, young Ruhollah was raised by his mother, Hajiya Agha Khanum, and his aunt Sahibe. Tragedy struck again in 1918 when both women died of cholera within months of each other, leaving the teenager under the care of his older brother, Mortaza Pasandideh, later known as Ayatollah Pasandideh. As historian Bakr Moin details in his definitive biography Khomeini. Life of the Ayatollah, the family claimed descent from the Prophet Muhammad through the 7th Shia Imam, Musa al-Kazim, a lineage that carried both spiritual prestige and a sense of duty. From age 6, Ruhollah memorized the Quran under local tutors like Mullah Abdul Qasim and Sheikh Jafar, then studied Arabic, Persian classics, and basic religious sciences in Khomeyn's maktabs. By his late teens, he was drawn to the holy city of Qom, arriving around 1921 or 1922 to study under the great Ayatollah Abdul Karim Heri Yazdi, who had just relocated the seminary there from Iraq. In Qom's Hafza, Khomeini immersed himself not only in traditional jurisprudence, fiqh, but also in philosophy, mysticism known as Irfan, and even poetry. He studied under masters like Mirza Ali Akbar Yazdi and Jawad Aka Maliki Tabrizi, devouring the works of Mullah Sadra, Ibn Arabi, and even Greek thinkers like Aristotle and Plato through Islamic lenses. He composed mystic ghazals under the pen name Hindi, reflecting his grandfather's Indian origins, and later published collections like The Confidant and The Decanter of Love. As Moin recounts, Khomeini taught private classes on Irfan and Mullah Sadra as early as age 27, an unusual move for a young cleric that attracted devoted students like Mortaza Motahari. His early writings, such as the 1928 commentary Sharh-e al-Seher on a Ramadan prayer and the later Sir al-Salat, translated as The Mystery of Prayer, revealed a deep spiritual dimension, blending ritual with inner ascension. By the 1930s and 1940s, he had earned the title of Ayatollah and was lecturing on ethics, Islamic history, and the role of religion in society, already quietly criticizing the secularizing reforms of Reza Shah Pahlavi, whom he blamed in his 1942 book Kashf al-Asrar for moral corruption, the ban on hijab, and even indirectly for his father's murder. But it was the 1960s that transformed the scholar into a revolutionary. In January 1963, Shah Muhammad Reza Pahlavi launched his White Revolution, a sweeping modernization program of land reform, women's suffrage, and literacy campaigns that Khomeini saw as a direct assault on Islamic values and clerical authority. He viewed the enfranchisement of non-Muslims and reforms threatening Waqf endowments as an attack on Islam. On 3 June 1963, Ashura, he delivered a blistering speech at Qom's Fajr Madrasa, comparing the Shah to the tyrannical Caliph Yazid and warning, "O Mr. Shah, your time is over, the people will soon throw you out." Arrested the next day, his detention sparked the 15 Khordad uprising, with hundreds killed in protests. Released after months under house arrest, Khomeini escalated his criticism. In October 1964, he denounced a new law granting U.S. military personnel immunity from Iranian courts, capitulations, as humiliating submission to foreigners. If the Shah's regime continues, he thundered, Iran will be destroyed. Arrested again, he was exiled in November 1964, first to Bursa, Turkey, then in 1965 to Najaf, Iraq, the Shia holy city where he would spend over a decade. Exile only amplified his voice. In Najaf, Khomeini lectured to packed seminaries and thousands of followers, developing his radical theory of Velayat-e Faqih, the guardianship of the jurist, which argued that in the absence of the hidden imam, a qualified cleric should rule society directly under Sharia law, rejecting monarchy or secular democracy as un-Islamic. These lectures, compiled in Islamic governance of the jurist, circulated secretly in Iran via smuggled tapes and pamphlets. As declassified U.S. documents and contemporary news archives note, Khomeini built a network across mosques, funding anti-Shah groups and allying temporarily even with leftists and nationalists. By the mid-1970s, his denunciations, calling the Shah the Jewish agent, the American serpent whose head must be smashed with a stone, were galvanizing a broad coalition of students, bazaris, intellectuals, and clerics. The death of his son Mustafa in 1977, widely believed to be by Sevak, the Shah's secret police, only fueled the fire. When a government newspaper slandered him in January 1978, massive protests erupted in Qom, then Tabriz, and across the country, met with bloody crackdowns. Khomeini urged no compromise. In October 1978, Saddam Hussein expelled him from Iraq. Khomeini chose Neufchâteau near Paris, a quiet village that became the global nerve center of the revolution. There, in a modest house, he granted interviews to journalists from the BBC, the New York Times, and American networks, his words translated by aides like Ibrahim Yazdi and Sadegh Ghotbajade. In one archived 1978 Paris interview with the McNeil Lahrer report, he declared the Shah's regime illegitimate and promised an Islamic government rooted in justice, not Western-style democracy. To the New York Times and others, he spoke of a republic where the clergy will not rule directly but guide, downplaying Velayat-e Faqih to appeal to secular allies. Cassettes of his speeches poured into Iran by the thousands, calling for strikes, oil stoppages, and mass demonstrations. As millions marched chanting Allahu Akbar from rooftops, the Shah's regime cracked. On 16 January 1979, the Shah fled into exile. Khomeini returned triumphantly on 1 February aboard an Air France jet, greeted by an estimated 5 million Iranians lining the streets from Tehran's airport to the city. When a reporter asked how he felt, he famously replied through an aide, "Hichi, nothing," a cryptic nod to his mystical detachment. 10 days later, on 11 February, the military declared neutrality, and the revolution was complete. Now at the peak of power, Khomeini moved swiftly to consolidate control. He rejected the provisional government of Shaper Bakhtiar, appointing Mehdi Bazargan as interim prime minister while declaring obedience to him was obedience to God. A March 1979 referendum abolished the monarchy, with 98% approval for an Islamic Republic. But behind the scenes, Khomeini's inner circle sidelined liberals, leftists, and nationalists. Revolutionary courts under judges like Sadegh Khalkhali began summary trials and executions of former officials. A new constitution, ratified in December 1979, enshrined Velayat-e Faqih, naming Khomeini supreme leader with absolute authority over military, judiciary, and foreign policy. When the US admitted the ailing Shah for cancer treatment in October 1979, radical students seized the American embassy on 4 November, holding 52 hostages for 444 days. Khomeini endorsed it, calling the embassy a den of espionage and using the crisis to rally support and purge moderates. In a 1979 interview with Oriana Fallaci, he dismissed Western criticism, insisting Iran answered only to divine law. The 1980s brought both triumph and turmoil. Iraq invaded in September 1980, sparking an 8-year war that killed hundreds of thousands. Khomeini framed it as a holy defense of Islam, rejecting ceasefires and sending waves of volunteers, including teenagers, in human wave assaults, promising martyrs' paradise. Iran regained territory but paid a horrific price. Chemical attacks by Saddam, economic collapse, and over 1 million refugees. Khomeini finally accepted a UN truce in July 1988, famously calling it drinking the cup of poison. Domestically, he launched a cultural revolution, purging universities, banning Western music and films, enforcing strict hijab and gender segregation, and rolling back women's rights from the Shah era, revoking divorce protections and lowering marriage ages. Revolutionary guards and comets patrolled streets, while executions targeted Kurds, leftists, monarchists, and Baha'is. In 1981–82, clashes with the Mujahideen Khalq killed thousands. Then, in 1988, Khomeini ordered the mass execution of thousands of political prisoners. Estimates range from 1,000 to 30,000, labeling them Mohib, waging war on God. Amnesty International and later UN reports documented the brutality, though Khomeini's supporters saw it as necessary to safeguard the revolution. Controversies defined his later years. In February 1989, he issued a fatwa against British Indian author Salman Rushdie for the satanic verses, calling for his death, and that of publishers for blasphemy. The decree shocked the world, sparking protests, book burnings, and diplomatic crisis, yet Khomeini framed it as defending Islam against Western insults. Iran's economy suffered under war and isolation, real wages plummeted, and millions of skilled professionals fled. Minorities faced mixed fates. Protected seats for Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians in parliament, but persecution for Baha'is and ethnic separatists. Khomeini's health declined with cancer and heart issues. On 3 June 1989, after 5 heart attacks in 10 days, he died at age 86 or 88. His funeral drew millions. Mourners tore at his shroud in grief, a chaotic outpouring captured in global news archives. Khomeini's legacy is as complex and revolutionary as his life. He transformed Iran from a secular monarchy into the world's first modern theocracy, a model that inspired Islamist movements from Lebanon's Hezbollah to global Shia activism. His Velayat-e Faqih remains the cornerstone of Iran's system, with successors like Ali Khamenei wielding similar power. He challenged US dominance, labeling America the Great Satan, and positioned Iran as a champion of the oppressed against imperialism and Zionism, declaring Quds Day an annual protest. Yet critics, drawing from books like Moyen's and declassified archives, point to broken promises of democracy, mass executions, suppression of dissent, and economic mismanagement that left Iran isolated and scarred. Public interviews from Paris reveal a master strategist who moderated his rhetoric for broad appeal before imposing strict clerical rule. The revolution's lesson, perhaps, is how faith, exile, and media can topple empires, but also how idealism can harden into authoritarianism. Khomeini showed that a single voice, rooted in ancient texts yet broadcast through modern tapes, can reshape history. Whether hero or cautionary tale, his dramatic ascent reminds us that revolutions rarely end where they begin. What do you think? Did Khomeini liberate Iran or bind it in new chains? Drop your thoughts below, like and subscribe for more untold stories of power and faith, and hit the bell for the next chapter in modern history.